Welcome to the place where paths collide. Crossroad Conversations, let's take the ride. From shadows deep to the light we seek. Stories of strength, the voices speak.
What's up, Worcester? This is Jacqueline from Women Strong Recovery and Wellness Coaching, and we are here with another incredible episode of Crossroad Conversations. This is episode 5, and I'm here with Elija. And I think this is going to be so powerful in the way that we talk and open up about what it is that he's experienced through his journey. I met him through Art Inc., which is very dear to my heart now in the work that they're doing. And so for me, I don't feel like I'm an artist, but when you give someone space to open up and explore that, it hits different and you can start to explore different parts of yourself. So I hope that this episode will allow you to do the same. And we are really having these conversations, these important conversations for Men's Mental Health Awareness Month, which is in the month of June. So all of these episodes will air in the month of June, and we're really excited to highlight and to show support and give resources and dive into what are the experiences and what can we talk about, what hasn't been talked about, and then how can we open that up for a bigger conversation. So can you introduce?
I am the owner and CEO of Gold Rose Art Gallery. I also do many other things. So my background is actually in psychology. I have a degree in psychology, and after I graduated, I wanted to continue my education with the realm of psychology in mind, but also adding creativity. And so for me, it was a little bit difficult because I was told my whole life that, what's the one thing you're going to be when you grow up? And so for me, I feel like that was actually the beginning of my struggle very early on, trying to isolate myself into one category, one thing, one box. And that was incredibly difficult for me. After I graduated, I started to venture off into different creative expressions. I also create music, for example. And I just wanted to find a way to kind of put it all together. Or maybe I didn't know how I was going to put it all together, but I wanted to find a way to do all the things that I love, all the things that I know were put in my heart to steward in some way. So I opened the gallery. It's an online gallery now for 2 years. 2 years ago, I opened it. And the whole art movement that I'm trying to push with that gallery is soul frequency expressionism. And so where that comes from is channeling shapes, colors, images that actually can resonate specific frequencies in your body. So when you take a look at it, you can actually feel a visceral experience, an emotion, a release, something to that degree. And my desire to do that came actually from this alternative healing modality called theta healing. So I'm also a theta healing practitioner. And so what theta healing is, if you're familiar with hypnosis or hypnotherapy, it's kind of similar, except the client does not have to be hypnotized. So you wouldn't have to be hypnotized if you were my client. I wouldn't have to hypnotize you. I kind of felt like there was a little bit of a distrusting feeling for me going to do hypnotherapy. So I wanted something different. And I came across this book called Theta Healing by Vienna Steibel. And so what this technique focuses on right now in this conversation, our brainwave is in the beta state. So that's like the active state. If we were to take 10 slow, deep breaths, get into a more relaxed state, that would be the alpha brainwave. If we were to do that for a prolonged period, that's when the brain gets into theta. And so that theta state is the state that hypnotherapists use to contact the subconscious mind of their client. So that's how hypnotherapy works, is they're in this almost hypnotic meditative state where they can remove subconscious blocks in their client. So theta healing works similarly to that, except the practitioner is in that hypnotic state almost. So when the practitioner is in that state and with the consent of their client, they can remove the subconscious blocks for their client. Wow. So it's really powerful. It's really cool. I experienced it myself, and if I hadn't experienced it, then I wouldn't have, continued on with that. But I noticed that in my practice and with my clients, I started to get images or shapes or colors that were actually, for me, it was the message was that those shapes that were showing up with each client, those colors were that person's soul expressing themselves energetically to me. And so I was just absolutely like amazed by that, because some of the things that I saw doing these sessions, I can't even really put words to. The closest thing that I could do was paint a picture or draw an image or do something like that. And so most of the images in my gallery are abstract because I feel that our souls are abstract in a way. And so yeah, that's where that gallery comes from. I also offer soul portraits, higher self portraits, I like to call them, which is something we kind of dabbled with back in November. So yeah, that's a little bit background about me, where I'm at, where I'm headed. Actually, I'm trying to find more ways to bring these things together, especially with music. I also tune music to certain frequencies as well to just kind of, promote healing on all kinds of levels, subconscious levels as well.
Yeah, I love that. That is such a, I think as we start to navigate, what does healing look like? What does, you know, owning maybe your story and trying to navigate and explore these modalities that were stigmatized, I think, right? There's like a
Yeah,
big stigma, because if you don't know, and it just seems so far away from you and
right,
inaccessible, um, and we can get uncomfortable. So then we like, shut that part out.
right,
Um, I love that that's starting to become like, no, this, like, there's different ways to heal. Like,
absolutely.
there's different ways to access the way that we approach our own personal journey, because it's also different. I remember, and it just kind of brought me back to when I first got sober and I was going to therapy, and they introduced me to an art therapist.
Mm.
And I was like, this is weird. But I always left there because we would approach it with, whether it was doing something with a magazine or color or something abstract, we approached like going through what I was experiencing and putting it on, this thing. And I was always impressed of like how that actually translated without me knowing, like it translated into what I was experiencing.
Okay.
And that helped me process a lot of like domestic violence situations and, experiencing, still in recovery and sobriety, like the relationships I've always had, that were carrying into that. And I was like, why is this happening? So it's a lot.
It is a lot.
But it's exciting. You can start to like talk about and explore that and give people different ways to navigate. So I bring it back a little bit to maybe in childhood, because I was listening to this podcast this morning, and she was talking about how people have talent, or they get hyper focused on this one particular thing that they're supposed to be good at, and it doesn't leave room to explore and say, hey, I can kind of get into different pockets. And then, it's exactly what you were saying about, just being able to access other things and then bring it together. So as you're, growing up and you're in this, you feel like you're boxed in, what does that look like? Is it because, the parents are like, you need to pick something, go with it, this, how are you exploring that as a child going into teenage years, and what does that look like?
Yeah, well, I think it's a few things. I think definitely in the household, it was a dynamic that I think a lot of people experience. And I'm not in a place where I have put any blame on anyone, on my parents or anything like that, because I also understand where they came from. My parents were immigrants from Lebanon, so they also had a lot of difficult experiences in this country. And I think that's also something that's not often talked about is why is there so much disruption or restriction in the household? Well, what's going on in the parents' lives? What are the parents experiencing that are restricting them emotionally from their parents? Because what I think my experience showed me mostly was that I didn't feel able to fully be myself or express as openly as possible. There was a lot of rejection. And not that it was purposefully done. My parents were always very loving and supportive, and they still are. It's more so when there's a lot going on, it's just the energy of the home just feels constricted and there isn't room for expansion. So for me personally, um, I used to hide when I was a kid a lot and just draw. I would disappear. And I come from a big family, so sometimes when I disappear, people wouldn't realize until hours later. But I had no problem with that. I would, even like if we had family events or things like that, I would just disappear. I'd have like a pencil and some papers and I'd just draw like for hours. And I loved that. So for me, I mean, my parents always loved that I was artistic. They always loved that I could draw or paint and things like that. But it was always like a hobby that you're good at, something that's like you can do when you're not a brain surgeon, something like that, you know? But so when I got into high school, that was when everything was more career oriented. And anything that was about art, well, that wasn't really a career. That's how it was, you know, brought up for me. My art teacher was probably one of the only really supportive people for me in high school, because she always, you know, told me to just keep going. You never know what's going to happen with art. Even if you do something else, do another career, just keep painting. Like you're really good at it. Just keep doing it and something will open up. And I had to trust that because I just loved it. So I was like, I'm not going to just drop this just because I want to go into medicine, because that's another love of mine is healing. And I actually was, before I went into psychology, was on a track to medicine. I can get into that in a little bit afterwards. But so in high school, yeah, everything was just about your career. And so art as a career, like artist as a career, like that didn't really make sense. Financially speaking, societally, it was just not something that's like as valued. That's how it came across to me. So I put it on the back burner. And even though it didn't feel right, I just felt like I had to for a little bit. So I put it on the back burner, went to college. I was a major in biology first, but I realized very quickly that wasn't what I wanted to do. I was completely fascinated by the mind. And so I took one psychology course and I knew that there was something there for me. So I continued and I switched my major to psychology. Because for me, psychology was not as limited as the medical track. It was like everything was so structured to me. I was like, there's no room for expansion here. It's just memorize and regurgitate, memorize and regurgitate. And I've never been that good at memorizing. I wasn't that great of a test taker because I felt like they were set up in a way to only reward how much you memorized, from textbooks, from lectures, etc. So for me, I was like, that's not really triggering the creative side of my brain. That's like very much, I felt like the right side of my brain was not active. And that felt like a whole piece of me was not active. And so that's why I knew that I had to do something different. With psychology, I felt that psychology was the perfect middle ground. Because yes, there is that logos, that logic, that rationale, the structure, it exists in psychology and in the mind. But there's also expansion. There's a lot of unknown when it comes to the mind and when it comes to consciousness and things like that. So I knew that that was where I wanted to go. And from there, I still continued to paint on the side, do something on the side, never really knew how it was going to come together until I also looked into art therapy. And I found so many different ways art has been not only therapeutic, but like completely healing for some people. Even music therapy. One of my favorite courses I ever took was music psychology. And in that course, we studied this research study, this experiment where Alzheimer's patients were exposed to specific classical music versus a group who were not. And the study very clearly showed the people who were exposed to classical music repeatedly, their Alzheimer's like decreased like very significantly. And so that alone, even if it was a small population, that alone can show you that music and art and frequency has the power to create new neural pathways in our brain. It has the power to trigger your own creative force. And I think that's where a lot of illnesses come from, a lot of diseases, both physical and mental illnesses, is people suppressing that creative force, suppressing that creative flow in their body, whether they're doing it consciously or subconsciously, just by nature of what the world looks like right now. I feel like a lot of people are suppressing a lot of themselves. So I feel like my role right now is to remind people of what it looks like to just let go, to not suppress yourself, and to let people know that you can do everything that you like. You can do everything you feel called to. And one way or another, you don't need to know every step how to get there, but one way or another, it's all going to come together, and it's going to be something that you probably could have never even imagined.
Yeah. I'm gonna go back to like the experience of, because you mentioned coming from an immigrant home,
Yeah.
and them coming over here, and the importance I think that is placed on, right, education and acting maybe a certain way, and like moving, which it seems like it may feel more restriction.
Mm-hmm.
So do you feel the pressure, right, to perform in this particular way? And how do you start to like not let it affect you in a way where your studies get affected, or, like, or like how you navigate? Because I'm thinking, from my experience is like my family came, like 8 generations here. And so I think we have gotten away from that need to get the education, get the things, because we're like, we're here. Like, we take advantage of that space. And so I think the opposite, where we were like, didn't take it as serious, right? Like, I mean, I graduated high school with a embarrassing number for my GPA, and like I didn't have a plan after, right? Like it was just like, okay, now what, so for you in that experience, like, how do you start to like pull away from that maybe constriction of like, it has to be this way, and expand, and like, does that leave room to explore what's happening, how that made you feel, and like go through? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so in all honesty, I didn't realize how much it affected me until much later in my life. And until I learned what anxiety was, when I learned what depression was, OCD, ADHD, all these things, until I learned what those were, I didn't realize that I was experiencing them. And when I was experiencing them, I kind of just thought, I don't feel good. Or I kind of just thought, whatever, I'll figure it out when I'm an adult. Or I used to actually tell myself a lot that, well, they don't understand right now, but I don't need to tell them. I'll just do what I'm going to do, and I'll be successful in it, and that my success will speak for itself. But what that does, and I've reflected a lot on that, what that did for me was it started to separate me from my own desires, and that causes a lot of inner conflict. My teenage years were probably some of the most difficult years for me, mentally speaking, and in other areas, but specifically, my mental health was not good at all when I was a teenager. And it wasn't because I didn't have a loving home. I did have a loving home in many ways. But like I said, there's just this restriction and this rejection of self that I couldn't reconcile at that time. I didn't know what to do with that. So I didn't even know that I was highly anxious. I didn't even know what that was at the time. So it was difficult. And for me, really, the breaking point um, was when I felt that I was completely just not interested in life anymore. I just felt like this place sucks. I can't even do what I want to do. I can't feel the way I want to feel. And all of that was actually conducive to my relationship with God. And it wasn't until I realized that I had been acting in a way of what you could call atheist my whole teenage years. I was very much atheist. And I knew deep down, like I believe there was something out there, but I felt like it was hard to access or inaccessible. And honestly, I kind of feel like the way I went to Catholic schools my whole life, and I kind of felt that the way they were teaching us about God felt inaccessible to me. And so I could resonate with some things, but I just felt unworthy almost of that divine love or that sort of connection with God. So it took a while for me to realize that all of these things were what were really restricting me mentally. And I was very depressed. I was, had high anxiety. I had very high OCD, to the point where I was always thinking about how my thoughts are affecting people. And I'm like, that is like a trap. That is a mental trap because people don't even know what I'm thinking. So how are my thoughts even affecting other people? It was just a way of keeping me in loop and in this inner conversation in my head that was kind of distracting me from the restriction I felt and the expression that I wanted to express. So for me, that sort of dynamic of, well, you need to get your education, you need to be a doctor, you need to be, all these things. I did feel that pressure, but part of me wanted those things too, but not in the way that it was presented to me. So I felt like I'll eventually find a way to navigate it. But the important thing for me is that it is so, so pivotal for parents to just open space for their children to be creative. It is so important because being creative isn't just about painting or drawing or making music. It's about their soul actually getting a chance to express in this world, and who knows what comes from it. Sometimes I've seen children draw like crazy things, right? And okay, it's not this, you can say this child is not Picasso, but there's something there. This child is communicating something, communicating emotions that they might be holding in. So there's a lot of error, in my opinion, in the way like the family dynamic is treated these days. But yeah, for me, I still have a lot of gratitude for all of this experience because it did lead me back to God. And it did lead me to realize that there's nothing in this world that could replace that connection to God. You could have everything you want, but you're still going to feel something's missing. There's something that's not fully aligned yet until you acknowledge the presence of God in your life. So even though these experiences were very difficult, it led me to that. So I do have gratitude for them.
Yeah. I love that. And I was just thinking, because I was saying right before here, I'm like, my daughter's like, put on my Elsa dress and my necklace. And I'm like trying to get out the door. And she is, very theatrical.
Yeah.
And she's singing and dancing all the time. And like, she was singing, This Girl Is on Fire.
Yes.
Alicia Keys. I don't have a voice, but she was singing that this morning. And I was just like, she's like, we sing it at school. And then she just kept singing it. And then she's like twirling around in her dress. And I'm like, and it brings me back to with her, with my children now, I had, by the grace of God, able to do it, all over again with my 6-year-old and my 4-year-old. And still in a lot of repair with my 21-year-old, right? But I'm like, the things my kids do and how free they just are, and they're able to like express And if something's bothering them, they say it.
Right.
And I'm just like, someone said the other day, like, oh, she's you. And I was like, yeah, she's you. She's me without the filter, because I would have got popped. You know what I mean? Like, but I remember in this saying of like, kids should be seen, not heard.
Right.
That comes up a lot. And I just look at my kids and I'm like, I refuse to let anyone quiet their voice.
Right.
Or their spirit. And like I think the biggest mission is to usher them into this world without having their spirit broken as much as possible. Yeah, they're gonna experience their own thing, but they're gonna understand ways to navigate through that, I think, because they know no one can take that away from them.
Right.
And so it's such I can identify with that, like wanting to just give them, like, for them to keep their voice.
Yeah.
And what does that look like? How do we allow for that space like never before?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and I think I've thought about that a lot. And I used to, even from a young age, be like, oh, well, when I'm president, I'm gonna change all these things, right? But you don't even need to get that extreme. You can start, first of all, you can start with your family. You could start at home and then locally. But for me, I always felt that the education system could really use an upgrade. And we're starting to see it in different schools, not even just around the world, but I've even seen in this country schools that are focused on stewarding a child's creative, preferences.
Yeah.
Because for us, for me, for example, in school, we did have art class, but it was one thing once a week, and you just do what the teacher told you to do anyway. So you're doing something creative, but you're not really getting to be creative. And I think those are two different things.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I'm like, I've curated an art show, and I'm like, I'm not necessarily like an artist, but now I'm like, no, but I am.
But
it just looks different. And now I can start to own that. Like, no, who just creates an art show? Like, I had a vision and I put it out there, and I had like almost 15, 20 artists in this show. So it was like, no, I am curator and this is art.
Yes.
And it just forms different.
Yeah.
So I like, again, that exploration of being able to, like, what does that look like, and have permission in that is, I think, so freeing and liberating. So as you notice, now hindsight, you can notice the anxiousness and anxiety in yourself and that restriction. Then you get to college. Do you notice there's, you say, okay, I'm changing my major. I get to make that choice. How did that choice feel? Were you worried about making that choice? Did you start to navigate different parts of yourself where you're like, no, I can make different decisions? Like, what do you start to notice in that space?
Yeah, well, so for me, the first thing I noticed was how unhappy I was. I was incredibly unhappy with the professors I had, with the classes I was taking. I actually had a lot of issues with the biology department. Like, for example, there was one particular class I was taking, and something about the professor's style of teaching, just I could not learn from how she was teaching. I could not focus in her class. And so I went to my guidance counselor, and he had showed me that there is another section with another professor, who I knew that professor because the way that the bio department worked was when there was an exam, the professors would alternate who does like the study for the exam. So whenever it was this other particular professor, I kind of got the information, and I was like, I need her as my teacher. And so in the process of trying to switch, the bio department was not letting me switch.
Mm.
And I was told that there were too many students switching out of this professor's class, and that they can't let me switch because it's not going to look great for the professor. And I'm like, well, we're not paying the money, we're paying for professors to look good. And I'm here for an education, and I don't feel like I'm getting that from this professor. And so it was kind of a back and forth between me and the department chair for a while. And I was like, at some point, this isn't worth it, because time is going by. I'm still having to take these exams, and I'm not doing well in these exams. The information is not sitting well with me. So I need to do something different. And so I finished that semester and realized that this is not the area for me. In that same semester, I was taking a psychology class because of the requirements for the school, and I absolutely loved the professor. He really opened me up to what psychology actually is. I feel like there's a lot of misconception about what psychology is. And I felt that almost limitlessness with psychology. I was like, that's what I'm looking for. And I do feel that with biology, and now continuing my education. Now I'm doing a master's and PhD in integrative medicine. But I'm doing it with a university that stewards the idea of alternative therapy, not just read what's in the textbook, memorize it, and take an exam. Because I always knew that there was a form of biology, of chemistry that is expansive, that does include and integrates nature and energy and consciousness, all these things that I felt exist, but they were not being taught about. So yeah, for me, I felt so much relief once I switched my major, and once I got off the pre-med track, because it wasn't even just in biology, it was other required classes that I wasn't resonating with the information. I wasn't resonating with the professors. And I honestly felt in many times that there were professors who, for whatever reason, did not feel the need or obligation to, teach me properly. Even when I would have one-on-one conversations with them, I'd go to office hours. I wasn't a lazy student, but for some reason, it just wasn't working out. And so I knew I had to let it go. And yeah, I did question in my mind, what would that look like for my parents? What would they think? But for me, I was like, there's no other way. I don't care what anyone thinks at this point. I have to choose what is best for me. And I think the first time any man or woman says, I don't care what anyone thinks, I have to choose what's best for me, that automatically just changes so many things for you. Because I feel like that needs to be the default. That should be the default. That I'm doing this for me. This life is mine. So I have to choose what's best for me. And that's not selfish. There's a difference between being selfish and respecting yourself, in my opinion. And so if you're going against yourself repeatedly, and that's actually what Jesus says is the definition of sin, is going against yourself. It's not just these actions are bad, it's going against who you are, going against your nature. So for me, that moment was huge. And my parents were understanding, though. So a lot of that fear that I had was just created in my own head. And when I had a conversation with them, it actually went well.
Yeah. They probably also was like, well, you're still doing something great.
Yeah.
You're
like, you can still be a doctor, right?
They're like, so are you?
Right.
So what are you saying? Like, you didn't drop out to go be like, I'm going to New York and I'm going to go paint, in a studio.
Exactly.
So
it was still acceptable.
It was
enough.
still, So you probably, it's still, but I think having the ability to choose you at, in that moment, and then I'll deal with consequence later.
Yes.
Which it seems obviously wasn't as big as maybe in your brain, your thought process is because we curate stories, right?
Yeah.
I always say that with even in recovery or with coming in and you think everyone is talking about you or has this thing or ideal and I'm like, my mind actually creates a lot of the story. And then I have to sift through what is really accurate, what isn't, and what does that look like. So I always used to if I went out to an event when I first got sober, I'd have to go to the bathroom and like just pray, like, God, center me. It's not all about me. Not everyone's like,
Everyone's out to get me.
like these things that are made up, and that would automatically ease me so that I could just focus on the moment, like what's
Right.
happening in front of me,
Right.
right? Um, so then what does it look like? So now you're in, you choose this different track and you're like, okay, this is for me. How does art start to play into you choosing to do psychology and you start to like maybe start to feel more freer as you go
Yeah.
along? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I graduated the year that we had the lockdowns. So that was really interesting for me. I have to be honest, I was kind of glad because I didn't want to sit through a 3-hour graduation. But so that year after I graduated, like the whole world seemed like it was on hold. And so I took that as a perfect opportunity to see what my options are moving forward. That's actually when I first got into theta healing. That's when I started reading these books, and I later became a practitioner. I did the certification for that, and I'm very happy being a practitioner in theta healing. I love doing that for people and for myself, and I still at this point had kind of left art on the side as just something I do or something I'll find time to do. Um, when I became a theta healing practitioner, I realized that there's a lot that I could do with that. It's not even just about removing subconscious beliefs that are blocking me, but the more I started doing that, the more I started removing those subconscious beliefs that were blocking me, the more my desire to create art was more prominent in me. And so I had realized that over time, just that consistent suppression of my desire to paint art consistently over time created subconscious beliefs that were not good for me. Beliefs like I'm not worthy of expressing myself, or beliefs of it is not safe to express myself, or it is not okay to express myself. These kinds of beliefs were actually held in my system. And so it wasn't until I literally removed those beliefs through different therapies that art started to come up more for me again. And it's like I almost like I remembered my first love in a way, which was, art. Um, and then all of a sudden I just, on a whim one day, I was like, you know what, let me just create a social media for my artwork. So I just created an Instagram account and just started posting artwork that I had created. And a lot of my family members already knew this about me, so they were, liking my pictures, sharing, and things like that. But I was very quickly like, no, I need to do more than just post. Like I want to, create. I want to be commissioned. I want to do something. And these days with like AI and ChatGPT, it's very easy to just find some advice. I didn't know how to create a website, but I learned very quickly how to create a website. And at this point, I had been a part of different like spiritual groups, men's groups as well. And so groups with people who knew who I was, and a lot of them wanted to support me. A lot of them became either clients of mine for theta healing, or a lot of them commissioned me to do artwork. So I think when I really felt that, wait, like this whole art thing is actually really good for me, was when I got my first commission. And then the few that came after that. One of my favorite commissioned works was for this woman who's now a really good friend of mine in Italy. And she commissioned me to paint a picture for her upcoming book, which is called Dragon Mother Phoenix Daughter. And it was just this book about her spiritual journey becoming a mother and what that felt like for her. And I think so many women can resonate with just this high level of spiritual experience that becoming a mother is. I think a lot of people kind of, shrink it a little bit to just like, you get pregnant, you have a baby, you raise a kid. And it is so much more. You're carrying a whole consciousness inside of you. It's a lot. So when she had told me the title of the book, just certain images started to come to mind. And before I paint, I meditate on just the intention of creating the best thing I can in the moment. And so I created an image for her, and she absolutely loved it. And she actually wanted the physical painting as well. So I shipped that out to Italy. And now it's the cover of her book. So that made me feel really good. It made me feel like I know that I'm meant to do this. And especially hearing feedback from people of what they felt looking at my work, I think that for me is the most powerful thing, is people saying, I looked at this picture and just cried and I don't know why. Or I looked at this picture, I don't know what it is, but it's reminding me of my childhood and I love it. Things like that. So just hearing those things is what mostly got me to realize, no matter what else I do, because there's a lot of things I like to do, art has to be, it's a talent that I know I'm meant to steward. And I'm seeing the results of that even now, hearing feedback from people. So it's something I want to continue with for sure.
Yeah. And so did you notice being in college and, you finish in college, you having this like, okay, I switched to this, psychology. Art still is not a focus. Do you notice your anxiety, your anxiousness, like, does it get heightened as soon as we COVID stops? And then, COVID happens, we get shut down, you graduate, like what, like, I think it's so important to understand, like, I think the mental health of it, like, right, that component, because a lot of people still having effects from having to shut down and not having coping mechanisms. I feel like for me, we talked about how lucky, because I was in AA and I was in like all doing these other things that were already prepping and giving us tools. So when COVID happened, we weren't panicked. Like we were like, okay, we have to find a solution. Like we have to do something different, because for us it's to die. Right. So it was like, all right, we were like, meetings were setting up on Zoom so fast. Meetings were setting up in parks. I created, I had already been teaching yoga and meditation and stuff like that. So I created, a women's yoga and gratitude meeting in the park that we could attend to right away, to give people that space. But there was a lot of, as we seen, the panic in our world, right? It was like the world stopped.
Right.
And then what? So how did that look for you in that space when it came to your mental health?
Yeah, so I was living on off campus at the time. And prior to that, I did 1 year studying in Australia. So I had at this point been living 2 years outside of my home. And I initially didn't have plans to go back to live with my family. I had plans to, get a job and have an apartment. Those were all things I was working on when everything got shut down. And so all of that kind of got scrapped. And so it was difficult going from being in this hyper independent state to being back into your home with your family. There's a lot of great things about that, but for someone who at the time was just looking to expand and to grow, I kind of felt like I was put back in that like child bubble. Yeah. And so there was definitely some difficulties in realizing, like, figuring out, well, first of all, how long is the world going to be on pause? Because like, I don't know what I can do right now. And so that's why I was just trying to find things that I could do remotely. And again, that's what led me to Theta Healing, because all of my clients, I see them through Zoom. So that was something that I could do then and there. And so I think at that time I was looking for things like that. I was like, I don't know what to do. And then even with art, I was just like, well, I can't, just go and paint a picture for someone in their home or something like that. But I can create a website, and I can, find a warehouse that creates products that can print my artwork on it. So that's where I was focused on. So even though that whole situation, I think, put the world on pause, I think it also elevated people's technique in like reaching people internationally so much quicker, or finding ways to still connect, like immediately connecting through Zoom or connecting through like just online, the whole online world just really expanded in that time period. And now I think it's really beneficial for every business. But yeah, I think mentally, I don't think anyone was good mentally at that time. But for me, that time period was also very spiritual, because I felt certain mental struggles I had had coming back up. And sometimes when you're in a familiar environment, that tends to trigger that as well. So I was trying to figure out what to do with all of that. And that again led me to another level of relationship with God, because at that point I was believing in God. I did feel like I had a connection, but there was more. There was something deeper I could do. There was physical things I could do to actually, intend to connect more. And I think that's what I also had been lacking, because I think for me, the college environment is so distracting in so many ways. I think college students, like, really, God bless them. Like, it's a tough environment. So many distractions to keep you away from yourself and your own needs. And even though I went to a Catholic college or a Xaverian college, God wasn't really part of the conversation very often. Or when there was the conversation, it was shallow. It was like, oh, well, we're having a chapel meeting, or we're having a service or something like that. But I'm like, for me, the whole idea was to integrate God into our education. And that doesn't just mean, for example, reading the Bible or Bible history even. It's, how does God connect to psychology or to biology or to chemistry? Because for me, God exists in all of those areas. And the only class that I really felt was making that connection was psychology. Because at some point in psychology, you just reach consciousness. And what is that? So that's where people start connecting to God and integrating it into what psychology is. So yeah, during COVID, when everything was locked down, I was just like doing more digging on that, because it was on my heart. It was on my mind that I had to do something with that. And especially at that time, I felt a lot of people were in fear. A lot of people were anxious. A lot of people were depressed. A lot of people were alone. So I was looking for a way to, well, how can I contribute positively? And that's when I came across theta healing, and it seemed like a great idea. Like, that's something that I could do for people remotely. And actually, every time I've had a client, I've had also, it was like healing for me too. So yeah, that's kind of where I was in that time period.
I was just, when you said, you're using this theta, and I think when we do modalities and we start to like see what that feels like, 'cause I started with yoga, and it was, to teach a class, to teach a women's, before a women's meeting, an AA meeting, we would, one of my mentors would teach the yoga class, and then like her life started getting busy. So I took yoga teacher training, and then I started to teach that class. But, we do it because like the bigger picture is to heal others, but really it's the healing starts with us. And like, but being able to expose other people exposes our own, things that are happening, and then it gives us the I think the space and room that we may not have had before,
Exactly,
to heal those parts of ourselves too in the process. Right. So what does that start to look at, like, as you start to venture into theta? What exactly is theta? I know you said a little bit, but how is it practiced, and what does that look like?
So theta healing, it begins first with a visualization for the practitioner. So again, if you were a client of mine, you wouldn't have to do anything. You just get comfortable, sit, lay down, whatever is most comfortable for you. So with theta healing, and the author who founded this modality, she found that a particular visualization can trigger that theta state very quickly. So if you visualize yourself, and this is what the visualization is, you first visualize yourself going out down through your feet, down to the earth, to the core of the earth, and just kind of gathering the energy that's there. It's very calm, it's very grounded. And then with your breath, pulling it back up into your body, up all the way through your crown. The crown chakra is right over here. And then visualizing yourself going up in a ball of light, past the atmosphere, past layers of light, and you continue all the way until you're into this pearly iridescent white light. Mm. And so what that is called in theta healing is the seventh plane. And so that is called the plane of unconditional love, which is the frequency of God. So when you do this visualization, there's actually something happening in your brain as well. As you're visualizing yourself go up, the activity in your brain is going inwards to the center of your brain, which is where the pineal gland is. So when your brain activity is in the pineal gland, that's when you're in this very channeled theta state. And so from that state, you can access your subconscious mind. And if you have a client, they're connected to you as well because they've consented to you doing the healing. Mm-hmm. And here's the really cool part with theta healing is you can't do theta healing with bad intentions. Mm-hmm. Because when you're connected to that seventh plane, the plane of unconditional love, that is also the plane of where you hear the voice of God very clearly directing you. You can't have bad intentions in that plane because you're in an elevated state of elevated frequency. So quantum mechanics kind of plays a role here too, because you can't mess around with frequencies. Mm. So for example, with hypnotherapy, I don't know if you've heard any, but I've heard many stories where hypnotherapist takes advantage of their client while their client is hypnotized. Okay. Well, the hypnotherapist isn't working in this state. They're just getting their client into that state. Mm-hmm. So they have
for vulnerability.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And they can do whatever they want. Mm. But with theta healing, your intention is healing. That's why it's in the name of the practice. So when you have the intention for healing and someone consents to you being a channel for their healing, the possibilities are really limitless. And so for me, this was really, really powerful because I has to become a practitioner, but this modality is just really, it's just a good spiritual book. It's just a good book to get anyone who's wanting to have a deeper connection to God. For me, this was it. This was like, this is what I always wanted. I always felt like I should have just like regular communication. Mm-hmm. And I think talking in your head to God is a great practice. But there's a difference between speaking to God and then hearing God. Mm. And I think, you just, when you have the intention to hear God, like you don't have to become a theta healing practitioner to hear God. You just have to have the intention and God will speak to you. But for me, I liked to have almost like a rhythm to it, like a structure to it. It just, when it satisfied the science part of my brain to be like, oh, I can scientifically explain to people how you can use your own energy and your own brain to connect to God. Because that was another thing with me, was that there was such a disconnect between spirituality and science. And for me, it didn't make sense because for me, like the science is the study of God, because everything that we can see in nature is a piece of God. So there shouldn't be any separation. And because with science, I always reach a roadblock. They'll sit and they'll talk to you about the origins of everything except the origins of consciousness, or the origins of the soul, or the origins of the animation of nature. Where does that all come from? So yeah, for me, it's been a huge part of my personal growth journey becoming a practitioner, because like I said, every time I sit down to do work on a client, I'm also connecting more to myself and to God as well. So it's like when you're in that state, you're just automatically healing in a way.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I think even when you were explaining like the roots and coming up and bringing up that light, like I felt that just in that moment. And yeah. I really connect to that because I think the work that I've been doing and showing folks like it's science and it's, for me, there's something else, right?
Right.
Like whether it's God or whatever you know, find that calling in, it's you can't, it is hard to explain until you experience it.
Exactly.
And so trying to navigate that space of like, if we can just kind of look at it maybe a little more scientific first, if that can be, you know, accessible,
Right.
that our breath, our own breath, can carry us through and can shift the way we see things and rewire our body
Right.
and our mind, that's a starting point,
Right.
you know? And then I think all the other things, it leaves room for all the other things to explore and expand,
Exactly.
right? Like, because, you know, I celebrated 11 years this year, but I was saying, you know, 2 years ago was really like, I was going through a lot. And it was the first time I realized that, you know, I was saying God this, God that, but I was using it as an acquaintance. Like I had an acquaintance with God.
Right.
I didn't actually have a relationship.
Right.
And I know that it got me to where I was at that point, right? Like all these little God moments, you know, like the story of like the nun coming to the gas
Right.
station and like, you know, um, but I was still very much in control of, or I thought I was in control of the way I moved in the world, right? And you know, I remember being in the car and having this experience and just crying out, you know, and what felt so deep to me, like, and it brought me into like, what else am I going after, right?
Right.
Like, um, and it brought me to like, I need to seek a real relationship with God.
Yeah.
Um, and so what does that start to look like for you in your healing, and how do you start to navigate more of that space that gives you more purpose?
Yeah, well, it was initially a little difficult because I had a very strong religious background. And it was initially a little difficult because I had a very strong religious background. And so, coming from a strong religious background, I felt like there was a lot of undoing I had to do. Because, like I said, even though I went to Catholic schools, well, when I was in high school, I was in a Catholic school and I was highly depressed and felt like I was an atheist. So, how does that happen? Isn't the whole purpose of being educated in a religious setting and environment, isn't that supposed to help us steward that connection with God? But so for me, at some point, I had like a breaking point between my transition from high school to college, where I just felt like so many things were going wrong in my life. I was probably at my most, like my emotional low. And I remember there was one moment where I was just laying on the floor in the bathroom and just sobbing. And I think that was the first time I actually talked to God, because I was just saying things like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, help me. I need help. Like, I don't know what else to do. Everything sucks. Everything is just so, it's making me so angry. I don't know what to do anymore. And I think that was the first time just having that moment where I was so vulnerable, um, and actually willing to release and let that emotion go. That was the first time that I had felt like a weight was lifted off my chest. And I was like, wow, like that was crazy. Because I was just sitting and crying and I was angry and ready to tell myself that I really didn't want to do anything anymore. And God responded to that in a way, because, like you said, I was seeking that healing, I was seeking that connection. And so it was in that moment that I realized, I kind of had this like epiphany of, now I kind of understand what those words mean, seek and you shall find. knock and the door will be opened unto you. And so I was like, let me see if I can work with this a little bit. But it took some time because I was still in that emotional low. But because I had that experience of release, that's what actually made me believe in God. That's what made me believe that things can get better. And so that's what kind of triggered me to wanting to go into the healing route. And at the time, I assumed that that was going into the medical field. So I was like, okay, I meant to do some sort of healing in that realm. But then, like I mentioned, going into college, I still felt that disconnect. People were too focused on treating like symptoms. And that for me kind of negates the whole idea of healing, because I think there's healing and there's treatment. And I think they're a little bit different. And so that's one of the things that I really love with the university, Quantum University, that I'm working with now, is the focus is on health potential. So it's not focused on treating symptoms. So if you have a patient, you're questioning, what are all the things that I can do to increase this person's health potential? So that includes diet, that includes neuroplasticity. What are mental things we can do to be helping this person? It might include other alternative therapies that are particular to their needs. But at the core of everything is emotion. So no matter what someone's experiencing, there's an emotion there that most likely needs to be released. And so for me, in that moment, I had realized that majority of my life, I had a lot of built up emotion of worthlessness and not being unworthy of God. And that's what that blockaded feeling in my chest was, that in the moment where I was begging God to reveal himself to me, and he did, that was released. And so moving through that and where I'm at now, like I said, there was a lot of undoing I had to do with the religious idea of God, because I also feel like I understood that there was something greater than me, and I understood that there was a soul, and that there was, something, connected to every living creature. But there was still this like disconnect, and that's where spirituality came in. And that's where I really understood that during the lockdowns in 2020, 2021, I was like forced to become more spiritual. I was, reading the Bible more, but I was reading it with a deeper intention. I think a lot of people, at least people that I was associated with, would read the Bible just to be able to regurgitate and be like, oh, I know what Luke chapter 7 says, I couldn't memorize that, but I was reading the Bible, and I looked at the Bible as like this multi-dimensional book, because I would read a passage and I feel like I would get a deeper message. There would be something deeper activated in me, and it was because of my intention in reading the Bible. Wasn't just to memorize or to look like I'm a religious person. It was like, enough BS. Like, I just want the truth. Like, show me the truth. Show me what I meant to do. Show me how I meant to do it. And that's why I think it is a powerful tool when you have the right intentions too.
Yeah. I'm getting emotional because I feel like, it's that thing where you don't know you can access it if you don't have the information. And like, once you have that, like, it just, everything else expands around you, right? So it's like, even with healing, like using different modalities, it's like, I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't even know people were in recovery from substances. So once I came in, and I was like, I was mad because I was like, why are people hiding this from me? And so then I also felt like that with my meeting this new relationship with God and Jesus. And I was like, why didn't nobody tell me? Right? But it's that experience of like, all of a sudden, just something makes sense. More sense than it ever did. And it gives you that permission to explore that without um bias, and then I think also without worrying about what other people think. Right? Like I will not be I will not be shamed into this idea of God and Jesus. And I didn't have any background. So I feel like for me, I'm able to come into it with no notion, right? Like I don't have any biblical background or religious, the only thing I can say is that I explored a little bit in high school, and I was like kind of laughed at, like with my mom, like kind of like, because it was the thing it was that religious thing, right? That everyone frowned upon that in my family. So we didn't have a chance to explore, which I'm also still grateful for that, because I think now being 40, I can come up with my own, idea of what that looks like. And at the same time, like my mother's been able to come into her own
That's beautiful
relationship. And like now we're like, just like when we got sobriety, like when we figured out we could, be in recovery, and my mother came, after me, and we're having the same experience with God. And like this, like you can't tell, if you heard our story, you can't tell us that there wasn't a God behind that. Um,
And that's just an important thing I just want to make note of, is the fact that you made that decision. You opened up that channel for your mom to receive it as well. And because the truth is that, you share DNA with people. And so when you open your system and your chemistry to new networks, anyone who's connected to you now, they're susceptible to that. And one of the coolest principles in like quantum physics is that it's easier to raise a frequency than it is to lower one. So if you are a daughter who is seeking the highest frequency of all, which is the Holy Spirit, God, well, when you seek it, it will find you. And that means anyone else who you're connected to, now you're literally vibrating at a frequency that's disrupting any lower frequencies with the people who are connected to you and around you. So it's just by default, just by you being in their presence now, you're helping them in a way,
I love that. I just had, so right before I got here, I was like, oh, I have my therapy appointment. And I'm like, I was talking to her about, this weekend, Friday, I woke up and I was like so anxious, and I was like trying to figure out, like, why am I anxious? Like, what's happening? And a lot, like, there's some things happening, but I think the biggest thing what I've been able to do now is like, my world before used to like spin and then stop, because I was paralyzed by the feeling, by the things happening. And I couldn't navigate how to like go through them, right? It would just stop me in my in my tracks. And, you know, what I noticed on Friday when I was experiencing this anxiousness, and and I'm like, oh, I gotta go to work, and I don't know why I'm feeling this way, and then how am I gonna be able to like concentrate? And I was like, you know what, Jackie, it like I had to like take a step back and be like, just continue with your day, reach out to the people that can support you, that can pray over you, that can give you that support and covering when you can't do it for yourself in the moment. And I was able to like not sit in it, but like identify really quick, okay, this is happening, and then how do I move through it? And I'm teaching a series right now, and like our first thing, our second workshop that we teach is like that embodied in awareness, right? And so we can actually access what's happening, and then how to create a solution if we don't know where it's coming from. Right. So that, like, I can identify as just like, it's like you can't hit a moving target,
Right.
you know.
And so many people are stuck on that identifying
Mm-hmm.
stage.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, that's not always enough, because now it's like you're identifying your problems, but you're not creating a solution to it.
Mm-hmm.
So now you know what the problem is,
Yeah.
but now you're still in that loop of identifying. And
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people who are kind of stuck in this loop of identifying what
Mm-hmm.
the issue is or where their issue comes from. And that's great. And we all need to be doing that
Mm-hmm.
with the, trajectory of moving through it and healing from it. Because I find, like, just from my experience, a lot of people tend to use that almost as like a manipulative trick of coming across as like someone who is on a healing journey. Well, they'll sit and they'll tell you like, oh, I'm this way, or I experienced this because of XYZ. It's not the same as moving through it, just from my personal experience, I've seen people use that, and that's kind of been the more annoying thing in the healing community, especially in the spiritual healing community. I feel like a lot of people use spiritual bypassing is what it's called, where they'll sit and they'll talk about nature and eating organic and meditating, doing yoga, doing all kinds of alternative healing work, but they haven't fully moved through that and fully moved through what it is that led them to needing these things. So, vigilance is always required, I think, and discernment. And actually, discernment is probably one of the biggest gifts I felt like I received from God. And that comes when, again, you are seeking that. Because it very, very quickly now I can meet someone and know if I'm meant to work with them or continue talking with them, or if it was just a quick interaction and nothing more,
Yeah, so you get stuck on what could have been or what is. I think, I think you and me and Jerry have talked about that too. Like, it's like you don't have to be in every space.
Right.
And not every space is for you. Right. And like, what does that look like to want to create work or whatever it is, but then understand that like it's not all meant for you. You don't have to be in all the spaces.
Right.
And that it will kind of, gravitate more to what I love that, like that stewarding and that, um, understanding of like what's meant for you will come.
Right.
Right. So what does it look like now where you're going on this journey of going for you said PhD, which is amazing.
Thank you.
I'm always so fascinated because like I said, I didn't like, my GPA is down there.
Mine is too.
But, I find like this curiosity and being able to expand and having that, and now I'm like curious. I'm like, I'm gonna be a theta practitioner.
Hey, why not?
I'm gonna look into that. But what is PhD? What does that look like? What does that mean for you in your practice and moving forward in your own healing, and then being able to, then guide someone else into theirs?
Yeah, well, so I started this program, I think it was October 2024. And it took some time for me to find this program. I think after I had graduated and I had been doing theta healing for a couple of years, I always knew that there was something else. There was another step there. Because there's many, like you said, there's many different healing modalities, and a lot of them I'm very interested in. Something else that I found is that just in the world we live in, titles or credibility is important. And I see a lot of people who have titles these days who are talking, and I'm like, oh God, people should not be listening to them. And at the same time, I see a lot of people who might not have a title who are exactly who people should be listening to. But unfortunately,
doing the work.
Yeah, exactly. They're doing the work. But just unfortunately, people will be like, oh, well, you're not a doctor, so what do you know? Or you're not this or that, So part of why I feel like I was meant to continue on this continued education path was to build some credibility for myself. But at the same time, I didn't just want a PhD just to have a title. That's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
So that's why it took took a lot of digging to find this particular program where it is an integrative medicine program, but again, their goal is health potential, and it's pro consciousness medicine. So it's including a lot of the things that I learned becoming a theta healing practitioner, but now integrated into medicine. And I think something also important is, I think the pharmaceutical industry, is beneficial in many ways. I also think it's been misused and misrepresented in many ways. So with this track, pharmaceuticals they're there for a necessity purpose, but the whole idea is to increase someone's health potential again, through natural means and through different modalities, and through diet. Diet is like a huge thing. Something for me that I could never understand was how, patients are going in with all kinds of issues and diet is never mentioned.
Yeah.
I had an uncle who passed away last April to cancer. And the advice that he was receiving from his healthcare team was absolutely insane to me. And even when he was in intensive care, the food they were feeding him was absolutely ridiculous. So to me, I'm like, there's a big disconnect between what hospitals are doing, what modern medicine is doing, and what the actual goal is. Because, for example, they would tell him that he shouldn't be eating fruit because they're high in sugar. At the same time, they're giving him like a little smoothie that is full of preservatives and chemicals. So you're never going to convince me that having, a bowl of fruit was worse for him than drinking that smoothie. So, that was something that's always bothered me. And so I've kind of felt like becoming an integrative medicine doctor, or having, for me actually was about finding people who are on the same path. That was the most important thing, because once I found that there is a group of people who are board certified doctors who are integrating consciousness and herbalism and nature into healing practices, I was like, okay, good, I'm not alone. There's more people who want to do this. So that was a huge relief for me. And so that's when I knew I wanted to be a part of whatever that looked like. So that's when I signed up for this program. But yeah, it was mostly my experiences with different family members, because I've had other family members with different conditions, and the way they were treated by the medical system was just, ridiculous. I lost a few family members to malpractice, and it was never really talked about, or it was never, no one was held accountable. And it's not that I feel like I want justice for those people now, but in a way I do. But what that looks like is different than what it, would have looked like when it happened. I think justice now, there's nothing I can do to change what happened, but what I can do is be part of the system that prevents that from happening for other people. And so that's what led me to integrative medicine and into this program.
Thinking about, we're talking about men's mental health and men's mental health awareness, and
welcome to the place
how
where
much has
paths
that played a part
collide.
in
Crossroad
the way that
Conversations, let's take the ride from shadows
receive the
deep to
information,
the
but
light
also
we
then
see. Stories
give that,
of strength,
do
the
you
voices
notice,
speak.
in your own practice, or the way that you are with folks, do you have a big like men's like following? Do you notice like what that looks like?
Honestly, I think, so I would say my clientele, for example, it leans more female clients. But I have been noticing a greater surge of men asking more questions, or just looking. I've had a few men who were either my mentees before in college or people that were connected to me in college or high school send me messages here and there asking me about things that I would share about, like fasting. Like, I'm a big fan of fasting. I think it's so good for you. So I am starting to see it. What I notice is there's a drawback for a lot of men. Asking for help is like it hurts the ego a lot, and I know because I experienced it too. I never wanted to ask for help. Again, in that moment where I felt like was my breaking point, was the first time I asked God for help. Um, and but I think we're seeing more men being open to that. Um, I have a couple men's groups that I'm a part of too, and hearing their stories and seeing that there are actually a lot of men seeking this work was really helpful for me. Um, I think, people have a lack of knowledge or awareness of these things. I think a lot of men resort to this sort of stoic energy where they have to do everything on their own or kind of be a martyr or things like that. And for me, that's just programming. It's not real. It's not what you're actually meant to do or to be. I don't think anyone's meant to just live their life carrying a weight that they're not supposed to carry, or any sort of emotional weight or trauma. So I am happy to see that more men are coming through. And I think I also really champion the men who are in this field and who are doing the work and who are sharing about it. And I always encourage men to share about it. Even just sharing your testimony, even if you're not, you don't have to be a healer or a practitioner in you could be whoever you are, whatever you're doing, but just sharing your story alone is really powerful. So I always, like, for me, those are the men who I connected the most to. Is I would see a video and I'm like, like there's some message there that is triggering me to want to share my story or triggering me to want to post something that's going to benefit someone else. And in the world of social media where people are posting a lot of nonsense, you might as well post some sense, so for me, yeah, I think more men are getting into it more. So I'm excited to see that.
Same. So as we end, give us one piece of advice or suggestion for someone watching this that, they can carry with them.
Well, for me, one of my favorite quotes of all time is from Khalil Gibran. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a Lebanese poet and philosopher and artist. And he says, between what is said and not meant, and what is meant but not said, most of the love is lost. And so what I take from that is when you're feeling something, whatever it is, you are better off expressing it in the moment in the most authentic, peaceful way as possible. Because I think a lot of people hold in a lot of their emotions. And anytime you hold in an emotion, it doesn't go anywhere. People think if they don't express what they're feeling, it's going to get expressed one way or another. And that's where a lot of people, they hold in a lot of stress and lash out in a moment where they shouldn't have, things like that. Or a lot of people hold in emotion and it literally creates a physical ailment at some point. So from what I take from that is just be as authentic as you can, share with the people that you want to share with, express what you want to express. And there's always something to gain from being honest with someone and being authentic.
I love that. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
This was good. I feel like I could go on and on. So Elija, thank you. Let us know where we can find you on the socials.
Yes, you can find me at Gold Rose Art Gallery on Facebook and Instagram. It's easy to remember.
Perfect. And I hope that this reaches whoever it needs to, and that the message really is that we can together, I think, as a community, heal. But then we do have more autonomy in how we start to choose ourselves.
Yes.
And so thank you so much for your time. I feel like I learned
having me.
so much, and you are going to make an impact and have already. And I feel that. So Worcester, what's up, Worcester? You can find rose gold art. And really, I think reach out and see about alternatives. You can find us on all social media platforms. Like, comment, share. This is a nonprofit. Donations are welcomed. And that's it.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Welcome to the place where paths collide. Crossroad Conversations, let's take the ride. From shadows deep to the light we see. Stories of strength,